We all know that the right habits and mindsets can be transformational in how we live our lives. But among the sea of advice online, it can be challenging to know who to trust with these important life decisions. At The Standard, we answer those questions and introduce you to some of the most successful people in the world in their fields and the habits and the mindsets they've used to achieve their success. To learn more about our social platform, head on over to www.thestandardapp.com. And now, your host, myself, Chris Palatroni. Welcome to another episode of The Standard. I am your host, Chris Palatroni, and today's guest is Ernesto Parisii. He is a certified NLP master and teacher. He is in Switzerland, although his parents are from Italy. And this is a master mindset coach, if you will. So for those that don't know what NLP is, it is Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So this has everything to do with rewiring your brain so that you can, tell yourself the right type of story so that you can deal with things like anxiety and depression, and so that you can live your best life. In this particular episode, we cover a lot of ground, from how science helps to eliminate anxiety, NLP, the subconscious mind, the conscious mind, reprogramming your brain, what you want to do in life and how to get there, how to get rid of old patterns, visualization, awareness, self-compassion, nervous system regulation, be an observer of your thoughts, EFT or tapping, different tools, ways, and practices. We talk about his best habit and his best mindset, which is a morning routine. We also talk about limiting beliefs and the power of the story that you tell yourself. I've known Ernesto for a few years now. He was one of the original contributors to the platform. He shared a number of habits and mindsets, all phenomenal stuff. So I was really looking forward to having him on this episode, and he did not disappoint. So without further ado, I want to welcome Ernesto. Well, I'm excited. Obviously, when we first met, I was starting the building of the Standard, and you were kind enough, and you shared. I was actually just looking at it again this morning. You shared a number of your different habits and mindsets. I've actually shared a few with some friends because I just think there's such great content in there. And obviously, as an expert in sort of rewiring your brain, yeah, it's just so fun. I can't wait to see sort of where you want to take the conversation. But I think what would be helpful for some of the listeners, Ernesto, is if you could just give a little bit of a background as to, a little bit about yourself, and then certainly your practice and what you do, I think would sort of set the backdrop to the conversation well.
No, it's fine. That's fine. Yes, I will probably highlight why I'm doing this, what I'm doing, because this is not just that didn't come because I loved it at the beginning. It came out of personal dark situation. Let's put it this way. But I started to look into these things.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. You were struggling with anxiety and depression, and this was a number of years back, and that was sort of the catalyst for you going down this NLP route of how do thoughts sort of influence you. So maybe you can provide a little bit more of that backstory.
Yes, it was basically I was struggling with anxiety since decades, basically. And it came, sometimes it was stronger, sometimes less stronger, and I didn't really invest much time in thinking about it. Why do I have this anxiety? Because it was quite a kind of living with it, and then a few years back, I would say it was about 20 years, I started to take antidepressant because of this. So my doctor at that point in time, he always said to me, you don't have a problem. Your problem is your mind. And but I didn't believe it. So I told him, maybe you are a doctor, you have to fix me. And that's probably exactly the thing which handicapped me a little bit. Outsourcing your healing to someone else. So I started that depression, and the day came in 2015, I guess, so 14, where I had a kind of a breakdown. because this antidepressant didn't really help me anymore. It helped a lot, during this time, but it came a certain point where they didn't were effective anymore, and I had a breakdown. So I didn't know really what to do next. Tried different other medication, they didn't work, they didn't help me. And I came across some strange thoughts, say, I don't want to live with this type of things all the time, and so on and so forth. So that's where I started looking in other things, and then other science, but also in spirituality and all these things which I never did before. I was laughing all the time when people told me that they're going to do some meditation and some yoga. I say this is something for pussies and so on. And today, actually, at least I meditate twice a day, and that's where the whole thing started. Really looking into other possibilities, nothing to lose. So I started reading a lot of books, self-help books, but they didn't really help me at all, except one of them. When one of my colleagues, which also was struggling with anxiety, told me, there is a nice book from a German psychologist, which is the name is of the book was How Brain Science Helps to Eliminate Anxiety. And so this brain science caught my attention. So I bought that book. It was a small, tiny one. And this one was a little bit different. It was different in the explanation. It was different in the exercises. It was a kind of explaining how the mind works in a very natural word, in a language which we understand. And then some exercises. And then I started doing these exercises. I had nothing to lose anymore. And all of a sudden, after I would say 10 or 12 weeks of continuous doing the stuff, something started to change. And for me, it was a kind of miracle. Say, wow, I react differently, I feel differently. I'm still having this anxiety, but I can handle it a little bit better. I can get out of that loop faster than before, and so on. And so I take that book. I looked at the author and wrote him an email and asking him what is behind this book. What is that? What is that for a technique? And so he came back at the very same day. I got a reply, and he told me this is basically 70% of why I explain here is NLP techniques, and 30% is how I use it. And that was for me then the starting point to say, okay, that's basically what I want to do, what I want to learn, because it's a fantastic thing. And we call it NLP. Other people call it differently. But at the end, it's always a bit of the same thing behind it. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I believe that this is definitely something which can help people get out of that loop, get out of anxiety, get out of low self-esteem and all these things which actually are related very much to each other. Yeah. So here I am.
So how would you, I guess, describe what you do today? Like, are you a coach? Do you work with people one-on-one? Is it virtual? Is it more social media? Like, how would you describe the way you support people?
Actually, yes, I'm a coach. I coach people, but I also train people if they want to learn NLP. But I'm not certifying them, so it's not a certification training. But most of my time and focus is on coaching people, helping people, especially these people who really, you see it in their faces that they really struggle with anxiety or struggle with some terrible thoughts and so on. So I'm helping them to understand that what their mind is producing, what they are feeling and thinking, that's basically nothing else than a construction of connection, and it's not who they really are. So it's. I also coach people who say, I always set myself a goal, but I don't achieve it. I quit, and whatever is behind it. So we go into more in depth, and then we develop a strategy on how to address this core thing, beliefs or core influences which they have. And I do that in a one-to-one basis, do that online, and I have an Instagram channel and where I post my thoughts. I post some of the practices just for people who does not have the ability to work with a coach. There are many of them. Actually, they cannot afford it. And I still get a lot of great feedback from these people. They really do. They really appreciate. And there are a lot of people and a lot of coaches on Instagram. There are plenty of them. And I think each one of them delivers a great contribution to people who actually are on the other side of the world. They cannot afford it, but they are desperately needed to know these things, to help themselves.
I love that. I think when I first started the standard, one of the things I recognized so quickly was, one, the power of coaches, whether we're talking about a nutrition coach or an anxiety coach or a mindset coach. But the brutal reality is, one, there are not enough coaches around the world to support all of humanity. And then the point that you're making is people can't afford it. And yet that's such a, anxiety, as you well know. I mean, it is the single largest mental health issue on the planet, affecting 300 million
Yes.
plus people. It is ginormous. And so, yeah, if you can for a second here, like tell us what NLP is. I've read a couple books on it. I'm not by no expert, but I got a lot into like neuroscience, and obviously there's a lot of crossover between understanding
Yeah.
the basics of neuroscience. And I think I'm looking at the ultimate introduction of NLP. I think I read NLP and Essentials, and I loved the concept of it. So tell us a little bit of what NLP is, and sort of like, I guess in the layman's terms, like what does it do?
Yes, NLP is actually an abbreviation of Neuro-Linguistic Programming. It is basically a technique which helps you to use your nervous system, your language nervous system, to program yourself to achieve a consistent result or change your patterns. So it is actually a sammelsurium, let's say, of techniques. It explains how the brain works actually with very basic. It's like a computer. It's just not as fast changeable like a computer. If you want to write your own software, which is possible, it takes just a bit more time to do it. But it actually explains what are the meta programs of the brains, how do they work together, what are the most important things to understand on your conscious and subconscious mind, for example. Why do we do what we do today? How is it possible, for example, if you drive a car, you drive it for 20 years and all of a sudden you don't realize that you drive from A to B? Why is that? So, and why are we always, for example, focusing, or most of the time, focusing on what we don't have, focusing on danger stuff, on what can happen, what can go wrong, what can happen? Why is that? Are we all so negative? No, actually, we are not all negative. It's just how the mind works. And I learned and in NLP, you learn how these things works. What are the tools you can use to become more aware of this stuff, and also begin to change some of these patterns and some of these habits, which is one of your biggest topic. Because if you want to have a new habit in place, you need to know, or you need to have a technique or make that pattern, to build that pattern and make it stick so that it becomes a habit at the end. And I think that's was my biggest takeout of NLP. See that your brain is never stops developing. Number one, you can change it at any time, and it does not mean that the older you get, the less you are you can change. That's absolutely exactly the wrong thing. It is probably a little bit more challenging when you become older, because you have a bigger subconscious hardwired programming, but you can still do it. And that's an important thing to know. And also a lot of great tools which you can use in the moment when you are caught by anxiety. And some of these tools, I use them still today, every day, which helps me to get out of this feeling of this sensations in my body, which anxiety is causing a lot of these sensations, of these pains also. And where people believe, no, this pain must come from something else. And then and at the very end, you understand that for all of a sudden, this pain is gone and you don't know why. Of course, if you have pain, you have to clarify. But usually, if the docs or whoever is checking you up doesn't see anything, then most of the time it comes from the mind, and there is a reason behind this. And so NLP is for me a tool, is a technique to reprogram yourself. And we also have to realize that was my hard learning during this time, that we are not a robot. It doesn't mean that we start today and tomorrow is done. It's not a 5-minute job. It is a journey. It is a kind of daily routine that you have to keep doing, because your mind, it never sleeps. And your mind, it doesn't focus on the good things. You focus on the bad things. And in order to keep the balance, you have to do the positive part of these two areas.
Yeah, no, I love that. I often think it's, I mean, it's like rewiring your brain, and I found it really helpful. I think everybody should read a book on, I don't know if they should read a book on or on NLP or just neuroscience, but I do think people should try to understand, at least at a very basic level, some of the way the brain operates. Right, to your point, we have so many thoughts in a given day, 40 to 70,000 thoughts. They're very repetitive. They tend to have a more negative bias. I think there's so many fallacies we have in the way that we think. I think that's helpful to understand some of our built-in biases. I remember seeing some of the diagrams of NLP of, you'd see like how much information gets presented and how much information we can synthesize, and then the mechanics in the brain of like, okay, great, millions of bits of information. Your brain can only digest a couple dozen of them. Then they run through your assumptions and your biases. Then they go through your mood. I mean, it's so distorted. So I do think there's some value in just understanding some of the way that we are wired as humans, because I think if you can at least get just a really basic understanding of that, the hope would be is that you can realize when you're in a situation that there might be an alternative way or a hack or a reprogramming that you can potentially put into play that might change that outcome for you. So I love the concept of it. I think the work you're doing is phenomenal, and I'm so curious, Ernesto. So much of this episode is going to be about you and your best habit and your best mindset. And so, I guess to kick it off, let's start on the habit side of things, and then we'll pivot over to mindset. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
let's pivot. Let's start with mindset, since that is sort of your forte, and then we'll finish with a habit. So, what is
Mm-hmm.
the mindset that at this stage of your life contributes the most to your mental health and your overall well-being?
I would say the most changes in my mindset I made over the last, I would say now, almost 10 years I'm doing this. It's 8 or 9 years, but it's 10 years I'm actually struggling with this. Yeah, it is that basically that I learned that my mind or the brain I'm having is not here to make me happy. It's here to make me survive. So it is basically try to eliminate everything which is not status quo, which is not well known to me, everything which is which is out of my comfort zone, um, by inducing this type of anxiety, inducing this type of existential threats to me. If I start doing a coaching business or if start changing a job or whatever it is not known, is the outcome is not known, then my mind will definitely fight it. So whatever, why is that? That's probably because of my childhood development. Not that I had a bad childhood, I had a very good childhood, but my parents came from Italy as an immigrant family. They did basically nothing. I made the experience over there that you always have to make sure that you do what you have to do, not what you want to do, what you have to do. That you always do a real job, whatever that means. But basically, do a real job. basically say all the time yes in order to please everybody, in order that you get somehow acceptance and all this type of things around it. So I think my mindset has changed in that perspective, that I say, I have a set of programs in my mind. Fine. They brought me here where I am today. So something is also in my mind working very well. It's not only they're working, all of them are working bad. So, but basically, it is that your brain will never bring you to a place to make you happy. So it's basically the moment you can add some pain to the situation you want to change, because the brain doesn't like pain. Yeah, it wants always to jump out of pain, and everything which is unknown is a pain because you don't know what's the outcome is. So whenever you can add some pain to the situation you want to change, then your brain starts to look for solution. But only then. If the situation is not painful enough, or that it's not struggling enough, it will keep you there. And so for me, it is a kind of looking at what I can do, what are my possibilities, what are the options, and so on and so forth, instead of looking what I don't have today, what skills I don't have. It's more of looking at what I need or what I want instead of what I don't want. And I make you an example. When I started with NLP, I had a coach, and she asked me, so what is your next steps now with your job, your current job? And I told her, I want to have a job which I don't work at the weekend. And her answer was, yes, that's what you don't want. So what is what you want? And I wasn't able to explain that. So basically, my focus was always on what I don't want, and that's what I got all the time. And that's actually a bit of oversimplified, of course, but the where you put your focus, it's what you attract. And that changed a lot. So, and it was not easy to begin with, yeah, because if you start all of a sudden say, yeah, I want to focus on what I want, and your mind is not used to it, guess what happens? You will have 1,000 voices in your mind saying, what are you doing? This is a waste of time. This will never work. You are too old. You are too lazy. Whatever it is, you will hear all these voices, and that's nothing else that your mind wants to protect you from an unknown outcome. That's that was my biggest shift, my biggest change in all these years. So, and that lead me to, whenever I have this type of voices, because I still have them, they are not gone, but I talk differently to them right now. So sometimes I really talk in a third person, as it would be a complete stranger. And that disassociates me a little bit from the power these voices have. And they lose power over me. And that's what I try to do with other people. If you start to talk into these voices in a way that it's not that you disrespectful, but in a third person, that's already enough to remove the power from you.
Are there other techniques you use other than, so when you say you talk to these voices, I guess creating an image in my mind of like, okay, you're having sort of like this inner monologue with yourself, and maybe that is the tool itself, but are there other tools you use as you're navigating this? I know you shared a few on the standard, but I don't know if they apply to this one specifically, but what are, if there are other tools, what do they look like for you as you work with this mindset?
And for me, it's what I learned as a very powerful tool in building a new mindset is actually create a kind of mind movie. Okay, it's kind of creating a movie in your head how your life should be, how you want you to be, and to really begin to create that movie every morning, especially when you wake up in the first half an hour. It depends how good your sleep was, but usually the first 30 minutes, 45 minutes, your brain is in a receptible mode, in a better receptible mode than during the day. And so if you start to visualize and to add feelings to yourself, how you want to see yourself, how do you want to think, how do you want to be, how do you want to behave. Also here, the moment you start, it looks awkward. It looks ridiculous. It feels ridiculous. But the more you do, the more this picture becomes clear, the more your feeling becomes positive, the more it becomes your natural picture also during the day. When you then are at work or you are somewhere during the day, these pictures which you visualize in the morning comes also, it pops up during the day, and then you begin to behave differently. Okay, so another example for that is when I started in the morning visualizing myself, what will be, how do I want to tackle my day, what are my things I want to do, and how do I want to do it, and how do I want to behave if I get criticized, for example, which was one of the biggest issues I had before my crash. I call it this way. Whenever I was criticized, or something was criticized, it was not me, something around me, I always projected to me. I project it to myself, I take it personally, and all this stuff. So, in this visualization techniques, I started a simple thing. I said, okay, the first thing I want to do is I want to react differently when I get or something gets criticized around me. And I started to visualize, how do I want to react, and how do I want to feel to this. And obviously, in the first few days, it didn't really work, but I kept going, because I learned that it is like going into the gym. If you want to build a new muscle, you have to keep going. It's not done in one day. And all of a sudden, after a few weeks, I felt it is a different feeling. It is a different way of reaction. So the reaction is a response I gave to that, more objectively instead of emotionally. So that was tiny little steps for me to build up the belief that working with your brain in a way that you can prepare it, you can prime it on how you want to see yourself, how you want to see the world, how you want to behave during the day, that works if you keep going, if you keep doing it. And I also have to admit, when I saw that some stuff is going to work, it's going better, and so on, I began to neglect it. I began to let it go a little bit, to skip some sessions and so on. Like, yeah, it works now. I don't have to do it, and I was. How should I say? It came back quite fast. The old pattern,
Mhm.
because it's. I mean, the old pattern is there for decades, and if you want to get rid of it, you have to you have to build the new one at least as big as the old one. And now people say, hey, do I need to visualize for decades? No, you don't. But it's basically, if you do it twice a day for 5 minutes, you can accomplish a lot. Okay, accomplish a lot, and you feel that your mind, your brain, starts to use the new pattern automatically without asking you first, is that the right pattern? And that's the goal. The moment you have to think about something, you will do it as long that you are present. But if you are not present, your mind will choose the other ones, the well-known patterns. And so if you work on the new one continuously, consistently, you will feel it, you will experience it, that all of a sudden your mind starts to take the new one.
Yeah. God, there's so much to unravel. As you were saying that, I was reflecting on some of the ways that I've navigated some of that too. And I agree with you. I think your brain is more receptive in the morning. I think it's a phenomenal time to tap into it. I couldn't also help but think, there are times in the day and certain circumstances that are happening in our lives that make it I don't want to create an excuse, but just harder to
Yeah.
be receptive to making change. And I think one of the things that I've learned is that, like, there are moments in my day, my week, my month where it's almost like swimming upstream. Like, it's just so much
Yes.
harder. And I think I've
Yes.
tried to provide some compassion to say, you know what, now is not the moment. whether even if that's something as simple as like I'm entering my day job and I don't have the time to worry about something
Yeah.
regarding the standard or something else. I think there's times of the day and within the week that if you recognize like the effort you're putting in is more effortful, you might have to find a more optimal time to do it. The other thing that really comes to mind too is when you say priming, I think priming in a slightly in an alternative way as well, which is how do you get yourself in the right mental state? So on this podcast, I bring up a lot exercise for me, being in nature. Nature
Mhm.
tends to bring a certain amount of clarity and awe to our lives, and it sort of helps, if in the right setting, can make you feel small, and thus your problems
Mhm.
don't feel so grand.
Mhm.
So I think a lot about how do you prime your body, your physiologically, emotion, spiritually, if you will, so that you can sort of take off some of that extra emotional baggage, and then you can bring said topic to the forefront and then deal with it in a way where you're not too emotionally high or too emotionally low. So I think of that as well as like another way to, I guess, bring some awareness to this issue that you're trying to overcome, and maybe give yourself a little bit of an advantage on how to do so.
Mhm. Mhm.
Do you do any of that at all? Like, do
Oh,
do those types of things sort of come into, because, I mean, you mentioned that this is a habit or a mindset, I should say, that that's been front of mind for almost a decade. So this wasn't like you picked this up last week. It's like it's like you picked it up and it's really stuck with you. So I got to imagine you've had a lot of time to contemplate like how to best navigate it.
Yes, I mean you just touched a few very very important points. I mean, how do you get into the mental state? How you basically calm yourself down after a stressful day? Especially in the last couple of years, we were hit by some events outside. Let's put it this way, which put people in a even in a higher stress level, in an anxiety level, and many of them they cannot they don't know, and I don't exclude myself out from it. So if you get into a very emotional situation where your mind and your body just doesn't allow you to do it, there are different things I have learned, and even after a decade, there are days which I probably have the impression that whatever I do, it's just not working. It's not hitting. Now, it's not bringing the effect I would like to have, but that's probably because also I have a certain expectations for good day and the very best day when I do these exercises, and I bring it along with also the bad days. But obviously, it is clear we have also bad days, and the important thing is to do it also in a bad day, and maybe to accept how the day is. Now, it's definitely not easy to accept such a day. You begin to beat yourself up and say, "This is me. I cannot do it." And blah, 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 blah. But and this is very very important thing. Maybe it is, as you said before, very important to have different way of calm yourself down, calm your nervous system down. When I started with meditation, it was almost 9 years ago. I had always my the expectation from myself to have a complete quiet mind. That's that's the goal of meditation, which is not. And I attended a retreat that time, and there was a guy who actually teached us a bit how to do it, how to tap into meditation. And this question was, "Is your expectation?" And I guess I was me is telling him, I want to have just a complete quiet mind. And his answer was, "Then you have to wait until you are dead because your mind will never be quiet." Yeah, and that was for me. So why are we here then? And then his answer was just, it's not about quieting the mind; it's about how you respond to that. It's the way how you learn to observe it, not to engage. This is all about what's about meditation. And it took me quite a long time to accept that, to find a way. How do I observe my thoughts? How do I do it? I mean, this is I mean, if I'm sitting on my cushion and so on, how do I do it? Do I just walk upside and so on? And it took me a while just to understand that observing your thoughts means nothing else than just sitting there, doing nothing. And whenever your mind starts wandering, which it will, we just take it back. And my technique is I focus on my nose there, and then I start wandering. I take it back, and so on. So this is thing I had to learn to how to calm down your nervous system before you can do this type of work afterwards. Um, or tapping. I don't know if you are familiar with tapping, emotional freedom technique. They call it EFT, where you tap on your meridian point, which helps also quite a lot to calm down your nervous system. Or going out for a walk. And I go out for a walk. I have my headphones on, and I listen to subliminals, for examples, which brings your brain waves also down and gives you the subliminal message into your mind. If you combine all these things, there is no right or wrong. Okay, if you combine them, some of them works today better than tomorrow, and other stuff works tomorrow better than today. And it has nothing to do with you personally. It is the way it is. And if you start to combine all these things, then you give it, you attack your mind for different perspective. And all of a sudden, these things begins to create these connections and to work together. And I think that's the most important thing I also learned, is not to say it has to work this way today too. No. Sometimes you have a day which is not like yesterday, and it is most of the day is different. You feel different. You had you get some bills to pay, which is on the first hand it looks a lot of money, and people don't know how to pay it. It's really different way of different emotional state. And people which I work with sometimes text me on WhatsApp and say, I feel the way I feel this today, and then I try to respond, try this, but try it. Or try something else, or go out for a walk, or let's have a call, or whatever it is, just to make sure that you learn that there are different tools, there are different ways, there are different practices, and that some practices can work today, it can be less effective tomorrow. And so, but if you learn to combine them, you will always find a way. And sometimes just don't do anything. Go out. That's it. Call a friend, go out, or go out for yourself, and just don't do anything. Don't even think about it, Watch a comedy, for example, which lets you shift that emotional state. Obviously, again, I understand that it is not easy. If you start with the practice, if you start with things, and you start in a situation which you probably are emotionally very much engaged, then it is not easy. The techniques are simple, but not always easy to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a fair amount of intuition comes in there, and just trial and error. It's, what works today may not work
Yes.
tomorrow. And, I think of like non-judgment and self-compassion comes in there. Just it's a journey. I mean, it's not exactly what people always want to hear, but I think the thing when it comes to this particular mindset, or just even self-development or self-improvement in general, it's just about developing a wide set of tools and practices, and very much sort of like a mechanic, learning when to use certain stuff and when you should pivot to something else. Well said. Let's pivot on to habit. So in a similar fashion, is
Yes.
there a particular habit right now that is supporting your mental health and your well-being, your overall success?
I think it's the habit of my morning routine. That's my biggest habit I have implemented in the last decade.
Okay.
And I think that morning routine has become a fixed place in my start of the day. I don't skip one of them, because I think it is a way where I tap myself where the day has not even started yet, and you can begin to prime yourself in a way that is you open your mind in a different perspective. So this is one of my most important habits, where I do a meditation, where I do a visualization, and where I do some writing. Not huge, I don't write a book in the morning. I just write a few sentences, which is in line with what I visualize. And that helps the mind, or helps the brain, to create more connections. It's just that is basically the aim. If you visualize, if you add feelings to that, it creates a certain type of connections. If you write something, it creates a certain type of connections. Obviously, if you're listening to stuff. And so I combine these tools every morning. I try to keep for 1 or 2 weeks the same tools, and then I change. Okay, and take all the tools into my repertoire, and I move so on. So the morning is a fixed habit, and the second one, I have 3 such routines per day, but sometimes I skip one of them. I have to be honest. I skip especially the one which I do in the lunchtime, because I just of time constraints. Now, many people I work with will say this is an excuse. Yes, it is one sometimes, but it's kind of at the time I don't have during lunchtime. And in the evening, when I come back, I also have a routine. I do a reflection of the day. I let the movie pause again, look at the situation, and say, okay, how would I do it if I had another chance? And I replay that in the new way. And sometimes, so these are the 2 fixed ones, which I commit to do it. And the same thing is I'm working out. This is also a third thing I do, not every day, but every second day, every third day. It depends how I feel. If I look back, when I was a little bit younger than today, I was working out every day, and so today I have the same ego telling me you have to go every day. That's not always productive, because you have to listen to your body, how you feel. If your body has fully recovered, yes or no. You can do some muscle tests to see, am I recovered? Am I ready to go? That's what I do also. And whenever the muscle test is positive, I go and do it. So, but in the mental health, it's just these 2 things I do consistently. And additionally, I write posts. Writing posts, reading them, helps me to actually do myself the stuff I'm propagating. Okay, because it doesn't help just to tell the people to do it and you yourself you are not doing it. But if you write about it, if you read about it, it becomes your world. It becomes what is around you. And I think that's the biggest habits. The more you talk, the more you write, the more you visualize the stuff, the more you become that person. And I think having 2 slots in 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening, that everybody should be able to do that. Yep. Because that's basically the way of taking care of your mind. Because the mind, we all know, if you don't tell them what to do, it will tell you. So this is my biggest habits. Yeah.
How long have you been doing this specific morning routine? And it sounds like, although you didn't phrase it this way, it sounds like a lot of the morning routine is about, just to stick with some of the words we've been using, programming your mind for the day, setting the tone. But how long have you been practicing this specific morning routine?
For how long in time? You say? I would say for it's 6 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
And then the overall duration of this, it doesn't sound like this is like a 2-hour process. Like, can you walk us through like how long you're spending in these different segments?
Yes. It's between 10 and 20 minutes. Sometimes when I do the visualization part, it's about 10 to 15 minutes. And after that, I choose between breathing, breath work I do, or I do some writing, 10 or 15 sentences, not more, which is in relation with what I have visualized. But usually it's all about 2, maximum 3 different practices, and each of them between 5 and 10 minutes. Yeah. So that's what it's all about. And obviously you can do more, but if that then becomes productive or not, I don't know. Sometimes for these things is more is less, but consistent. Yeah, not doing 1 day, 2 hours.
Has there been a time in the last 6 to 7 years where you've skipped this morning routine? And if so, how did that change the way you felt, or yeah, how did it change the way you felt throughout the day? Have you ever skipped it? Maybe we'll start there.
Yes, I skipped it, especially in the Sunday morning when we were about to go out with the family. And my mind began to induce some thoughts that you have to move, otherwise they will not go out anymore with you, and all these kind of crazy things. And I skipped it. But and I would say, if you would have asked me these questions 5, 6 years ago, it was okay to skip it. Doesn't care. But if I skip it today, I feel guilty.
Mm.
Because after all these years doing it and see the impact and see what has helped me a lot to get this balance, even if I would use self-compassion, I think if I skip it, I would just beat myself up. And that's why I guess if I can recall it, I skipped it just a handful of times in the last year. Because that's something, if I also say, if we go out tomorrow, if we doing a journey or a trip or whatever we do with the family, then I just get up 15 minutes earlier and I do it. That's basically what has become really part, and I'm proud of that, because if I look back on how I was before all this happens, uh, I would never have imagined myself to invest 20 minutes just doing these things in the morning. Never, ever. And now I cannot be without it. And that makes me a bit proud of that, because it's working for me, it's working with myself, it's giving myself the time I actually deserve in the morning.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. Let's pivot to this as sort of like the final question here. So much of these episodes that I do are highly focused on the individual and the way in which you operate your life. But what I do like to do as we sort of exit is bring this back to the larger, the more macro picture, which is, we're all in this together, right? There's 8
Yes.
billion of us on this planet. I'm a big believer that if, you should take care of you, and if you take care of you, then you're a better person for other people. And so, in a similar concept, but this is hypothetical. So, if you could wave a wand and you could bestow some habit or mindset on all of humanity, something that all of us would just adopt, is there one thing you feel would nudge us all in a more loving and kind direction collectively?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for everybody which I worked with, but not only with the one I worked with, all my friends, all my family members, or my relatives, whoever, I know, since I'm spending time with this, I noted one thing which almost every human being has around me, and that's not believing in themselves, not believing in what you're capable of, in seeing how you talk to people, what are your aims, what are your dreams, and whatever you can do. I would say, without any exceptions, um, everybody focuses on what they don't have, on what they can't do. And I think if we collectively understand that this is what comes out on the first hand, it's always your ego, which is a construct of neurological connections. It's nothing else. And your heart has a different view, a different intelligence, a different feeling of what you're capable of doing. If you learn how to distinguish between those two, then you know that actually you can do everything. You just have to really believe in it. And we lost that. I mean, this is how I see how the kids also today, what they learn in school. They don't talk about these things. They talk about stuff which they have to at the end, I don't know, but they not believing in themselves. And I think that's what if I understood your question correctly, this is what I noticed, that most of people lost, or they had that, because when you're born, you get to this world, you do whatever you want to do until the people around you start to give you limits.
Mm-hmm.
And before that limits, you believe that you can do everything as a child. That's why a child doesn't really care what they are saying. They just say it. They tell you what they think. And I think we have to recall. We have to bring it back into our consciousness. That basically, our mind, we love it, and because it tears our day. But it's basically the biggest limitation we have is our own mind. It's what we carry with us. And not all of them obviously are the same, because you see people being very successful. I admire you by doing this platform, even though you have already how many social media platforms available, but you still started it, and you're still doing it, and it becomes a great platform. It's a niche, but it's still a platform. And so what I'm saying is, if you believe in the things and you can do it, and you just remove, or you don't focus on whatever you don't have, but you focus on what you actually have, and you start with that, then I think your life is also just a different perspective. It's a different focus. It's a different emotional state every day. And I think that's what I saw the most, that people lost trust in themselves, they don't believe in their capabilities. That I see a lot. And I include myself into it. I'm not saying that I'm completely different. It's just the way I see it.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Where can people go, Ernesto, to learn more about you? Where's the right place to send them?
They can go to my website.
Right there. Look at that.
Yes. Or to my Instagram account at Ernesto Parisii, in one name. I can get in touch with me over there. So I'm uncomplicated in that one. So, but on my website, it's a lot of information is there. And I think that's where you can find most of myself.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to include all of that in the show notes. Ernesto, such a fun conversation. I feel like I could have easily dragged this on for hours, but for the sake of time here, I'll definitely have to have you back, because there is so much to unpack when we talk about rewriting your program, rewiring your brain. And this is a topic that, not every topic applies to all of humanity. Your brain applies to all of humanity. So loved having you on. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your knowledge with us.
Thank you, Chris, for having me. It was a total pleasure for me too.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Standard. Before we go, click on the link in the show notes of this episode to learn more about today's guest. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with somebody who you think would benefit from it as well.